Welcome back to CBS Mornings Plus. By the way, about 1 in 10 Americans has been diagnosed with a rare disease. Maybe you know someone, or that's you being affected yourself. There are nearly 10,000 rare diseases that we know of in the U.S., but only 5% have FDA-approved treatments. What if I told you that cures or treatments might already exist for some of these rare diseases, drugs that are already sitting on pharmacy shelves that are currently being used to treat completely different conditions? I'm talking about something called drug repurposing. For example, Viagra, which was initially created to treat a type of chest pain, but I think we all know what it's being used for now. There's also high blood pressure medications that are being used to treat hair loss, and a long out-of-use morning sickness drug, which is now used to treat types of blood cancer. The list goes on and on. Now, a nonprofit named Every Cure is using artificial intelligence to look for even more opportunities where this could work. In a new TED Talk out today, Every Cure's president and co-founder, Dr. David Fajgenbaum, explains how he repurposed a drug to treat his own rare illness, saving his life over a decade ago. He is here now, along with someone you know, our Gayle King. You guys met at a conference previously.
We met at a conference this summer. I think I'm here as David's support animal. Because when he gave his presentation, no kidding, guys, you could hear a pin drop. His story was so riveting. And when it was over, I said, oh my God, will you please come on CBS? Yes. So I'm thrilled that he's here.
We're so happy to have you, Doctor. So please just tell us, what was your ordeal and how did you save your own life?
Well, thanks so much for having me. Thank you for being here with me. I was a third-year medical student when I got critically ill with this horrible disease called Castleman disease. I actually
that you had never heard of.
I'd never heard of in medical school, and I actually was so sick I had my last rites read to me 15 years ago. When it was
and doctors said there's nothing more we can do for you.
They did.
Okay.
And
Yep.
I said goodbye to my family and my friends.
Yes.
But then I turned into action. I started trying to find a solution for my disease. I ran experiments in my own blood samples. I discovered a drug that had been around for decades for another disease, could maybe save my life, and I started testing it on myself.
But David, you make it sound like, and so then what I did was I just came, number one, he said, I wish researchers would come up with something.
Yes.
Then he said, well, why don't I do it myself? Right. So you go into the lab yourself, day after day, trying to come up with the cure for yourself.
That's exactly right, and just as Gayle said, you know, we sort of all hope that the solutions are out there, that our doctors will find them, but sometimes you realize you have to turn your hope into action.
So is there just one needle in the haystack in your case, or are there a lot of needles and a lot of other drugs could be repurposed in the same way?
There are a lot more needles in this haystack, and from the moment that my life was saved with this drug, all I can think about is how many more drugs are sitting at our local pharmacy at CVS that could save more lives today. And so I've made this my mission, first doing it in the lab at the University of Pennsylvania, where we've repurposed 13 more drugs for diseases they weren't intended for. And now with this nonprofit, Every Cure, we're using AI to do this at scale, look for more drugs for more diseases.
Well, how does that work? Because aren't drugs developed by pharmaceutical companies to treat specific diseases? So how does the backwards way work?
That's exactly right. So though diseases may appear very different, you mentioned earlier a morning sickness drug, thalidomide, can be useful now for leprosy and the cancer multiple myeloma. They appear very different, but they share the same underlying problem or mechanism in the body. So the same drug can actually treat both diseases.
But what made you think, though, David, when the doctors say we've tried everything, there's nothing more we could do, why did you not believe them?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking,
question.
if the doctor tells you, you think the doctor knows what he or she is talking about?
Well, there are a few things. One is I had this amazing girlfriend, Caitlin, that I wanted to have a family with.
You're now married with
I'm now
two
married with
kids,
two kids. I had made a promise to my mom. She passed away when I was in college from brain cancer. I promised her I would dedicate my life to trying to find treatments for patients like her. And I had to do that, Gayle. I promised her I would do that. And so those things were driving me, but also I had been given chemotherapy multiple times, and each time the chemotherapy had saved my life, but I kept relapsing. And I thought to myself, if those 7 chemotherapies weren't made for my disease, but they saved me, is there an 8th drug that's made for another disease that can maybe save me? And so that became my mission.
So you went into the lab, started testing your own blood while you thought you had this terminal illness.
Yeah, we had an important date. May 24th, 2014 was when my wife and I were due to be married, and I needed to make it to May 24th, 2014, and I wanted to do everything I could to find a drug. And we made it to May 24, 2014.
And
it was the best day ever.
So, Doctor, tell us about the Netflix comparison that you make in your TED Talk.
Sure. So in the same way that Netflix uses the movies you watch, the actors, directors in your favorite movies to predict which movies you may like to watch in the future pretty accurately, we use a similar machine learning algorithm to predict the drugs that might be useful for new diseases in new ways.
But you almost died, though, David, 3 times. You almost,
5 times.
Oh, sorry. Okay, 5 times.
You remember each one when it happens.
Yeah, I believe you're number 1. But you almost died 5 times. But yet you still kept going. And now do you think it's possible to find drugs for any disease? Do you believe that we're at that point based on the work that you do?
So I don't believe that there's a drug for every single disease out there. I don't believe that the 4,000 drugs we have today can treat all 14,000 diseases that don't have drugs. But I do believe that there are many, many drugs that can be used for many, many more diseases. And I think we have a responsibility as a society that if there's a drug at CVS that could help a child who's suffering today, we've got to do the work to make the connection.
Can we talk about money for a second? Why aren't pharmaceutical companies doing this already, A? And B, you get some of your funding from the federal government. Are you being affected by budget cuts?
So drug companies are looking for new uses for medicines. However, they have to pick the 2 or 3 diseases that are the best fits for that particular medicine. And those other options are sort of left to the side. So what we feel like is so important for a nonprofit is to go after those potentially non-profitable opportunities. Because the other thing to remember is that 80% of the drugs that are already approved are already generic. So it's actually not profitable to find a new use for that medicine. And so then to your question around the federal government, we are a recipient of funding from an organization called ARPA-H. We're thankful to continue to be partnering with them because we've got to find as many drugs as we can for as many patients as possible.
Well, you're a driven human being, and I can understand why. And a lot of people are counting on you. And you got this
we are
wonderful
counting
family
on
now.
you.
I mean, no, really, it's a beautiful
I agree,
thing.
Tony.
What a wonderful way to reuse your 6th chance after the 5 almost dying. You know, you're on your 6th life, and we're all grateful for it.
Really encourage people to watch that TED Talk because the before and after picture of you about what you looked like back
I've
then.
seen these you were mistaken for your dad's new wife. You looked pregnant.
Wife.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yes.
Well, that TED Talk is available today. Dr. Thank you so much. You've already saved lives with this incredible technology. Dr. David Fajgenbaum, thank you so much.
I told you he was good. I'm
Yeah,
so
we're so
excited
glad you
to
stayed,
take.
Gayle.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes.
That was today's By the Way. Thanks to you both. And you can catch David's Tech Talk, like I said, at TED.com.